Uh-huh. Yeah, we're live. It is Thursday. So some slight change in my schedule for those if you've seen me before, obviously on a Friday. Now I've decided to move to a Thursday just to fit in a number of the things that have been going on in my life. Makes it easier for me, but hopefully still deliver the same kind of value and give you the same kind of insights that I have been doing previously. And I will do my best, obviously, to answer your questions and help you achieve the goals that you want to achieve. So if you're watching in the Facebook group, then obviously you'll notice that the focus of the group is very much about growing your visibility. You know, you cannot help your clients, you cannot sell your products, you cannot sell your advice if nobody knows that you exist. So that then has become what I believe is the overall theme, certainly the overall theme, but certainly what I think is the common goal and the biggest cause of frustration for most of the people that I get to speak to, and I guess for most people that reach out to me or buy my products. So I decided to start there. I think, some of the things that I've been able to do, not everybody has immediate access to. Certainly, if you're coming online and you're starting with a smaller budget, being able to kind of jump in and start advertising from day one may not be appropriate. And certainly, if you don't have the skills to advertise online, then it's definitely not appropriate, because then you either got to buy them in or you got to learn them. So there's a learning curve to that. I would say as well, probably about, where are we now? July. So probably April time, I think it was. I'd have to check exactly. But around April time, I mapped out, I had this idea of combining paid and organic. And there was a reason for doing that. And the purpose was that organic has less resistance. So let me explain what I mean by that. So if I'm sharing something organic, like if you went on Google and you type in a search term, whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is, and the results come up, then the organic results, you have less kind of resistance to, oh, these people are trying to immediately sell me. Does that make sense? Versus if you see an advert and you see it's sponsored, your first thought is, well, these people are paying for this. They're going to be wanting to sell me something. And so there's this resistance, rightly or wrongly, because of course, you could run an advert where you ultimately want to sell something. Of course, that's why you're in business, aren't we all? But within that, there could obviously be a whole process of nurturing and such like, and building the relationship. But from a pure dealing with, if you like, people's objections or your potential prospects' objections, somebody seeing something organic has less resistance. This guy, it's just organic. They're putting out content. That's great. It might be useful to me. I'll have a read of it. There's no real commitment on my part. There's no concern on my part. I don't need to be worried about somebody trying to obviously get my wallet or get my credit card. And there's that sort of thing going on. I'm trying to be humorous about it, but that sort of thing's going on. The advantage of paid, of course, is speed and scalability. Like organic is a slow process. Unless you somehow knock it out the park by putting together some sort of viral video which just takes off. And obviously there are, there's certain things you can do to increase the chance of something going viral, but there is no perfect recipe for it. And I've seen people say, this is my recipe for going viral, and you do this. It's like, yeah, it's okay. And yes, it increases the probability, but it is never a surefire thing. I mean, that's just nature of virality. Is that the right word? Nature of something going viral anyway. But if you can combine the two, then you've got something very powerful. So I've been doing this with a couple of clients where I've said, look, this is the overall goal. It's rather than looking at it as I need an immediate sale right today, look at it in terms of, if you are a little bit patient, if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of time up front to create something which allows you to nurture your ideal prospects and allows you to build a level of trust with them and a bond with them, and allows you to create a belief in them. What I mean by that is your positioning, and we'll get to that in a second. So in terms of how you want to be known, so if you say, this is how I want to be known, and I want people to have a level of trust in me, a level of faith in me, so there's a level of credibility there. If you're willing to, say, take a couple of months to do that, let's say 60 days, and at the end of the 60 days, then do some form of deliberate commercial promotion, then of course your results are going to be way higher. All other things being equal, they're going to be way higher. You're going to make way more money. You're going to make a higher profit margin than if you just try and go straight for a sale. Does that make sense? And that's what I'm a big fan of now. So I've done everything, and I've done, an element of, I guess, the simplest idea of this in the real world would be where we've run an advert to promote a free event. So, of course, people come into it know there may potentially be some sort of sale there because it's a free event. But at the same time, they're kind of weighing that up against, well, there could be valuable information that's shared with me up front. And then if I don't want to take the whatever's on sale, I don't have to. And all of that's true. And that's worked very well in the past. Online, that works less well because too many people have done too many webinar type things. So the webinars are out there. Webinars still work. I have total faith that I cannot perceive a time where webinars would never work. Not if you do them right, but the ability to get people on them and the cost to get people on them is just going up and up and up. Right? Because it's not just obviously about, just you run an advert and say, register for my web class and, call it whatever you want to call it, come up with something great. So obviously things that will influence whether people will register will be the title of it and so on, and the content of it, and if it's relevant to them. And of course, that's part of your role as a media buyer, is to make sure you put your message in front of the right people. But let's say people register for it. But now you've got the situation where they've registered for it saying, I'm interested, but of course it's not happening right there, right that second. So there's a delay before between when they register and when they show up for it. And during that time, all sorts of things can happen. People get distracted. There's all other things going on. It's free, so they haven't paid for it. So there's no real commitment on their part. It's just something that at that moment in time, when they saw your advert, they saw the message, thought, oh, that might be interesting. So they registered for it. So therefore, what we're seeing, and I've seen this consistently now, is no matter how good an advertising campaign is, the results over time, so over a period of a couple of months, the number of people registering, the costs start to rise, however slightly, and also the show-up rates start to fall. And they can be quite significant. So in other words, it's getting more and more costly to get people to the webinar, which means, of course, you're then in a situation of, well, are you then just selling something which is higher and higher ticket, so that even if you get one sale, it still makes a profit and covers all the costs of your advertising? And that's, that's one way to go. But to my mind, that's a real hammer approach. That's like, like we got molds in the garden at the moment, which is a real pain in the ass. But it's like that whack-a-mole thing. We got that big sledgehammer and you're whacking these damn things. And like, you're just trying to create the most expensive, high value, high ticket item you possibly can in order to be able to make your advertising costs work, to make the numbers run. It's like, yeah, okay, that's a really crude, blunt force way of trying to do anything. So better than that is to combine paid plus organic. Now, what that means, of course, if you're starting out and you've got a low budget, you can still do this organically. And this is where stories really come in. If you're able to take this and put some advertising budget behind it, you'll see it scale way faster. And obviously you'll get results far quicker. But the idea is that let's take something where you think, okay, I want to nurture people. So you think in terms of a nurturing environment. So great ways to do that, great ways to nurture people, is to have them on your email list and to send out content to them on a regular basis that nurtures the relationship. Is to put them in a Facebook group and to share content with them which nurtures the relationship. Is to create a YouTube channel and put out videos and content to grow your subscriber list so you can nurture the relationship, or some combination of all of those things. So, it's like you can combine email, Facebook groups, and YouTube. And I'm doing all three at the moment. And I'm about to do a lot more with them because I've been testing a few different things in a small way, and now want to roll things out in a slightly bigger way. But I want to obviously pay close attention to it, and I will be sharing the results with you so you can see what's really working and what isn't, or certainly from my experience. So tied in with that, the kind of content, what content do you put out and how do you best deliver that content? So stories is where all of this kind of comes together. Stories are the most powerful delivery tool, if that's the right word, for sharing any kind of content. They are the most powerful tool for sharing a belief. So for example, if you say, I want to position myself as the number one expert for selling to what pops in my head, real estate agents or something like that, then you want people to believe that you are brilliant at that you are the go-to person for that. That's a belief. So you want to be able to imprint, if you like, that belief inside your prospect's mind. You want them to wholeheartedly agree with you that you are the go-to person for that. Does that make sense? So the best way to do that is through stories. The best way to get people to engage with any piece of content is through stories. The best way to write emails is to include stories. It's like all of it is story-based. And we're in a place now where I would say, and this may not be an original thought, I may have read it somewhere years ago, but I would certainly say the person that tells the best story wins. Bottom line. So we're in a situation and in an environment where storytelling has become not just a nice to do, not just in its own right and advantage, but it is an incredible edge. What's great about it is stories are completely evergreen. So what I mean by that is there are strategies that you can use online, and there are tactics you can use online, which when they're brand new, work brilliantly. But then when the rest of the world kind of catches up and jumps on them, they end up saturating the market. And so these things lose their effectiveness. What is never going to lose its effectiveness is stories, because it ties directly to human nature. So you come back to one of the questions which I probably asked before or mentioned before, but it's a common question that I ask myself on a regular basis, which is what doesn't change? So there's all sorts of things that do change, but what doesn't change is human psychology. That ain't going anywhere. That isn't changing anytime soon. You know, we've been wired a certain way, we've evolved a certain way, we've got a certain psychology which allows us to make decisions which ultimately drive our survival, or survival of the species, I should say. Because, you know, from Mother Nature's point of view, it's the species that matters, not you and me on a personal level. So psychology is not going to change. Now, within that, if you think about evolutionary psychology and evolutionary humans, we started to evolve, we started to communicate. But if I want to pass something on, let's say I want you to take a message to someone else, then what's the best way for me to ensure that you remember that? Or better yet, let's say I want to share something with you as a child that I want you to adopt and begin to influence your behavior so that your chance of survival is better, or that you fit with the tribe better, so that you become a useful member of our community, so that you are someone who's able to help the community survive and to thrive. Then what's the best way to deliver that message? In a story. And so that's been something which has been going on. So literally our brains have evolved for stories. So, you know, over hundreds of thousands of years, our brains have evolved to both tell stories, remember stories, and to be able to share stories. So that isn't going anywhere. So from a very, very powerful way of delivering anything, stories rock. Now this, in the last week, I was listening to an interview with someone who spends a lot of his time now writing emails for clients. So his whole focus is to kind of come in and not just act as a consultant, but literally kind of take somebody's emails and say, look, here's how we can write them better. And his full focus is really writing better stories. Because what he's doing with the story, because stories can not just convey a message, they can convey an emotion. And the reason that we still love stories and watch movies and get drawn into them, or practically, you know, we're there, we're living the story with the characters, is because of that emotional connection, emotional bond. So he was talking about, you know, where he's come in and he's taken, for example, you know, somebody's selling, I think it was a supplement business. And in a particular month, one of their supplements, they'd sold 200 units in a given month. And it's like, you know, that was okay, but it wasn't great. And yet he came in and through writing a series of emails, all story-based, and really using stories to drive the emotion, then they did a promotion at the end of it, and they did, you know, something like well over 200 units in 24 hours. So to go from something which had sold, you know, 200 units over a 30-day period to selling more than that, or at least the equivalent in a 24-hour period, really highlights the power of story. So I want to share a little bit more about this. I've made a couple of notes. So one is, and I'll share some tips really on telling stories. I think I've driven home the idea of the purpose. It's like if you want to establish your positioning, if you want to establish your legend, so you kind of think about, like, you know, I talked before about invisible influence. And, you know, I've mentioned within that the start of all invisible influence is really, it's knowing what is the result that you're offering and who are you offering it to. So in other words, what's the result you're selling? Who are you selling it to? Those are the two kind of primary foundational questions that you need to answer to make anything work online in terms of your business. Once you understand that, then of course, if you say I'm delivering this particular result, then you need your prospects to believe that you can deliver that result. And that immediately ties into your positioning. So if you want to position yourself as a maven, as an expert, as an authority, that's important. Like, you know, if you go back to just, this is a quick aside, but this will be useful to you. There's a pyramid of what I call, actually, I think I put a slide together for this. So let me bring this slide in. Yeah, let me do that. I have got a slide. Let me share my screen. A specific window. Yeah, I'll just bring this in exactly as it is. There we go. I'll just leave it as it is. So look on this. I've called it the visibility and influence pyramid. So if you look at this in terms of your ability to grow your visibility and your ability to influence your prospects to buy from you, and I would add on to that as well, your ability to increase your fees. So if you're selling one-to-one and you want to attract a higher fee and a better quality of client in that regard, then the higher up you go on this pyramid, the better. It's like, if you think of it in terms of we live in in the Western world, we very much live in a celebrity culture. So the highest level of influence and visibility is a celebrity. We've seen this just grow over the last 2 decades, really, from the early days of reality TV to celebrities who nobody could really understand why they were a celebrity. They weren't really known for anything. They weren't, a particular movie actor or anything like that. So they were celebrity and they were famous for being a celebrity. And it's like, well, how does that work? But it just kind of highlighted the beginnings, or certainly highlighted the whole celebrity culture. And it's just grown since then, where we have way more reality TV shows where you follow somebody around and they're a celebrity for being a celebrity. And then on the back of that, they might launch businesses. The Kardashians would be a classic example. They became a celebrity family. They became celebrity for being celebrity, famous for being celebrity. And of course, on the back of that visibility and on the back of that influence, they have launched businesses and done extremely well with them. So your highest level of visibility and influence is celebrity. If we go down to the bottom and I'll work my way up, then obviously the lowest level of visibility and influence is a generalist. If you're just another business coach, like this week, I did a quick search on LinkedIn as part of something I was doing, and I just literally put in business coach on LinkedIn. Millions of them, as you can imagine. Even narrowing it down, to a couple of countries, still millions of them. And, just to look at their immediate, not their full profile, but if you like to look at a list of them, read down, you've got a name and then you've got a one-line piece. And for the most part, it's like, they all just say they're a business coach. So how do you differentiate them? How would you, if you were looking for a business coach, how would you possibly make a decision as to which one you should follow? You couldn't. And that's the point. If you're a generalist, you're literally if they genuinely want a business coach and they're just going, I don't know how to measure the quality of a business coach. I don't know anything. I'm just going to pick one because I really want to pick one. Then they're going to pull up a list. Maybe they go on LinkedIn and go, business coach, see a list of 2 million. Don't get past the first page. And in their mind, they just metaphorically take a pin and go, like pinning the tail on the donkey where you close your eyes and just go, bump, I'll go with that one. That's literally what they're doing. That's what you're hoping they do to pick you. They literally close their eyes, bump, open their eyes, go, oh, I picked that one. Right, I'll contact that one and say, hey, will you coach me? That's literally what a generalist is. You are completely relying on pin the donkey to get clients. That's your whole strategy. That's your marketing strategy in a nutshell. Pin the donkey strategy. Here, go on. I've come up with a new phrase. That's my IP. You can't take it. Anyway, so move up from generalist to specialist. Now you're a bit more of a specialist. I guess, coach would be a better example, but I've started with business coach. So business coach as a generalist, what would be more specialist? Well, break business down. What is business? It's a whole bunch of different things. So you've got marketing, you've got selling, you've got operations, you've got human resources, you've got legal, so you've got all these different aspects of a business. Within the business, it could be, obviously we see a lot now with technology. So it could be the website, it could be a sales funnel, it could be all these things. And they are in their own right specialist areas. So even within advertising, it could be you advertise on YouTube, it could be you're a Facebook advertiser, it could be you are a Google Display Network advertiser. It could be you are pay-per-click, Google AdWords advertiser. And again, they've all got their nuances. So you could literally be a specialist in any one of those. So we go from generalist to specialist. Now somebody is specifically looking. So one, your client, your potential prospect would have a greater level of sophistication. In other words, they know, for example, they're looking for somebody who might help them with YouTube advertising. So they've already made some decision that they need advertising. They want it to be on YouTube. Maybe they've got a video and they want to stick with video. Maybe they've started a channel and they want to grow it. So let's say they now go on LinkedIn and they put in YouTube advertising coach. That's more specialist. I haven't tried this. You could try it yourself, but there's going to be a lot less of those. I mean, significantly less. I mean, maybe you should try it right now as I do this, but no, I'll do that later. But there will be significantly less of those. So then again, they're going like, there may only be 3. There might be 3, like, given area, they might go, I want somebody in my, in my country or in my area. and maybe there's 3. Like maybe let's say they're in London, and there's only 3. So they go, there's 3. I'll just pick one. So again, we're back to pin the tail on the donkey, but your positioning just grew because you're one of a smaller number because you're a specialist. That makes sense. So now you've got more visibility, you got more authority, a little bit more. Next level up is more visibility, more influence, I should have said. Next level up is to be an authority. So if you can be an expert, you can be the maven, like I wrote a whole book on being the maven for that reason. Because at the time I wrote the book, being the maven was a real advantage. I mean, it's still an advantage, but it's not as much as an advantage now because, again, loads of people have jumped on the idea of being the authority, the expert, the maven. So they've introduced that into their marketing to help them with their own positioning. So, of course, everybody's an expert now. So now it's like, okay, how do you get above that? And that's where the stories come in. So now you can be an expert. So now you're the expert so you're not just a YouTube advertising specialist, you're a specific expert. And you might position that by saying, you deal with companies that are a certain size. So you might be saying, look, I can take your product and I can scale your product to whatever it is, X. Like I guarantee I'll make you money. So now you've got a better, stronger, more compelling argument. You got a more compelling strap line. You got a more compelling promise because you're the authority on it. And maybe to other people also say, this is the person you should talk to. So like if you start asking around, people say, who's the person I should be talking to about YouTube advertising? And they say, oh, you should talk to this guy, talk to this guy, talk to this guy. And of course, there's different strategies for helping you do that. But the point is you're now a maven, you're an authority. So that gives you greater credibility. Fastest way to do that, of course, is to introduce something into the marketplace which gives you that positioning. So go back 10 years, the simplest way to do that would have been to write a report. I wrote a report called The Credibility Crisis for a simple reason. Most people weren't writing. And even today, most people are not writing. They're not writing good media reports or writing a book. We've seen an explosion in the idea of people offering a service saying, I can get your book written and published so that you can use it as a tool to position yourself as the expert. Great idea. Still not done a huge amount because there are barriers to entry. Like the biggest barrier to entry to any of these things is effort. People have to put in some effort. And most people don't want to do that. They want to just have things handed to them on a plate. And I would say that's our greatest competitive advantage is that you put in the effort. But anyway, let's say, you put out a report, but again, you want people to read the report. What's the best way to do that? Engage the messages inside. Use stories liberally through your report, through your content. So again, and then we can move from authority to celebrity authority. So how do you become celebrity? Well, you start using your stories in a way to enhance your celebrity. So one of the ways to do that is to bring in an element where you are more engaging, you're more entertaining, you're more inspiring, you're more funny. Like if you play to your strength, if humor is one of your strengths, bring it in because that will immediately help differentiate you. So if you can combine that celebrity with authority in a business environment, you've got one of the literally, other than being a true celebrity, as in, movie star type thing, you have got the highest positioning available, which means you can charge the highest fees, which means you will gain the most visibility. And certainly you can achieve what I would call celebrity in a niche. Like when I ran my NLP business, I became a bit of a celebrity in a very tiny niche, but it worked. To apply that idea today, it would work tenfold because obviously the marketplaces are so much bigger and the niches, even a small niche, is still bigger because you've got access to the world rather than just aspect to your locality in terms of geography. So this is where we're aiming. It's like, can you get to, I don't think I need that. Can we get to celebrity authority? Literally, it's a weird sensation. But anyway, can we get to celebrity authority? Yes. Best way to do that is to use stories. So let me just bring me back. No, remove that bit. Yeah, there we go. There we go. All right. So we want to use stories. So a couple of things, couple of tips on telling stories. First of all, a story is a very specific moment in time. So what I mean by that is if you want to tell a story, it's like go through your memory bank and pick a specific event. That's the story. If you want to share a message, and I tend to do this, I'll think about what's the message I want to share. So the message could be the belief that you are the number one person, or you are certainly the go-to person for a specific promise. So you need to decide in advance. To make this work, you need to decide in advance what's the result you're selling. So what's the promise that you're making to your prospects? So I would suggest you could start with something generic. And then obviously as people get kind of latch onto it, you could grow that and get more specific. Like, for example, one of the promises that I'm offering is that I will help grow your visibility. So you become more visible to the right audience. You become more visible to the people that you want as your clients, as your customers. That's my promise. Now, if I want to take that further into a promotion, I would make that tangible. So I would, like, for example, that might be like saying, okay, look, I will grow your visibility so that you have 1,000 true fans in the next 60 days. So I could say you'll have 1,000 true fans in 60 days. That would be a very specific promise related to the concept of visibility. So if I want to be known for being able to help people increase their visibility, then I've got to start with the generic visibility. So you got to decide what's the result you're offering. So in my case, at this moment in time, I'm thinking visibility, growing someone's visibility. So you got to decide what's the promise. Then you want to wrap that up in a story. So then you want to go through and think about, okay, what would be a great story that would allow people to believe that you can help them with their visibility? Or you can help them with, let's say it was weight loss. Let's say it was you're deciding that actually you're going to help women who just had a baby get back into pre-pregnancy shape. Maybe that's your promise. So you say, okay, so we know it's to new mothers. So we know that, we know who the who is, and we know the result is, shift the pregnancy, extra weight, get back into great shape, get back into your favorite sexy jeans that you were in before you had the baby. So that might be a promise. So it's like, well, what's the story that would help you tell that? So either you can tell a story that is, if you've had that experience yourself, so if you are a woman and you've been through pregnancy, had children, and then got back into shape, then you can tell the story of your frustration with maybe the way your body looked or the amount of weight you were carrying after you had your baby and how long it was taking to shift it. So that would be a specific trigger, as in, actually, let me just make up a story. Then I can highlight. It's probably easier to tell a story and highlight the pieces than it is to try and do it the other way around. So let's say I'm a woman. Let's say I've just had a baby, or I'd had a baby at some point in the past, and then at some point, something emotional, like there was a frustration. So let's say I talked about I'd had a baby, and 4 weeks later, obviously being a new mother, all the lack of sleep, the stress that comes with that, the excitement of having a baby, like firstborn, but all of these things going on. But like I finally got the baby to sleep one time. It was in the middle of the afternoon. The baby had gone to sleep, and I was like, whew. And I turned around. I was in the bedroom. I turned around. There was the mirror, and I caught sight of myself. And I was like, oh, I wasn't happy with what I saw. It's like I'd had the baby. I thought previously, like when I first got pregnant, I thought, wow, I'm pregnant. That's great. Going to have a baby. I'll try and do the best I can in terms of, maintaining a certain level of exercise to sort of help me make sure I get back to my shape afterwards. But I'm sure it'll be a breeze. I'm sure once I've had the baby, getting back into shape will be really easy. But of course, once the baby's born, finding time to exercise is not easy. There isn't a specific time you can exercise that because, trying to get the baby into a routine isn't always easy. The baby has certain challenges, colic or whatever it might be. So all these things are going on. And there I finally got to sleep. And what I thought was going to be an easy process for me to get back into shape turned out actually it wasn't as easy as I thought it was. But I turned around and see myself in this mirror, boom, I felt this flood of frustration. Like, I've got to do something about this. I've got to find a way to raise my baby, nurture my baby, look after my baby, enjoy being a mother, and get back into shape because I'm not just a mother. There is more to me than just being a woman and a mother. Maybe that's the thing. But my point is there's a trigger event in that story. So the trigger is a very specific event. And this is what makes a story a great story, or the beginnings of a great story. So I've heard people trying to tell generic things, and they're not stories. They're just a mishmash of things going on in their head. But unless it's tied to a specific event, it's not a good story. So a good story has a very specific trigger. So in this case, it was catching sight of yourself in the mirror was the trigger. So it's a specific event on a specific day at a specific time. That's the trigger. Does that make sense? Now, what you can have is a series of triggers. So that could be so in itself, if you go back to my little story that I just made up, seeing yourself in the mirror was the trigger. But then that also triggered other specific events, i.e., before pregnancy thinking. I remember thinking when I first got pregnant, so like, literally just done the test and it said, boom, you're pregnant. Woohoo. I thought, this is not a problem. I'll do a certain amount of exercise now. I'll continue to do as much as I can, as long as it's safe for the baby and safe for me through the pregnancy. And then when I have the baby, as soon as the baby's born, I'll be back on it. I'll jump out of the bed. The baby's born. They'll put her or him in my arms and I'll be off. I'll be down the aerobics class with my newborn baby. It's like, don't work that way. So that initial trigger of count yourself in the mirror, not happy, then triggers another very specific event of, this is what I was thinking before pregnancy. When I first got pregnant, saw the results, I'm pregnant, boom. One of my first thoughts was, oh, my body's going to change. That's okay. I'll find a way to get back in shape really quickly. So it fires another specific event. So you can have a chain of events, and those chain of events can become the story. I'll give you another example of this. I remember seeing Tony Robbins speak. I think the first time I ever saw him live, I'd heard him on tape a number of times, but I'd never seen him live. And I went to one of his UPW events. It was in Cardiff at the time in Wales. And I know day 2, he tells a lot of stories. He comes out, he's got this stool he sits in, he just tells story after story after story. And it was amazing. I was amazed by the fact that he told these stories and it went on for a couple of hours. And I remember thinking to myself at the time, like, when I tell a story, it's over in a minute. It's like it's a story, it's a specific thing. This happened, boom, that was funny. Or this happened, boom, I was annoyed. Whatever it might have been. But it's a very specific thing and it takes no more, maximum a couple of minutes to tell. How on earth is he taking a story and making it last 2 hours? And that was a question I had. So there I was sat in the seat and I was thinking, how does he do this? And that got me focused on how to understand stories better and how do people do it. And I realized after a while, I listened to him, I listened to Richard Bandler, and I actually listened to him over and over again. And eventually, because you're asking a question, your brain kind of starts to put the pieces together and notice the pattern, or certainly mine does. And I began to realize actually what he was doing was he was taking a series of events. So if you've got a timeline, he was taking a series of events through his past, all connected by a common theme. So in the same way I took this trigger event, catching sight yourself in the mirror, going back to pre-pregnancy, specific event when you first found out you were pregnant, the common theme is being in shape. So I'm now connected 2 events with one common theme, being in shape. So Robbins had done the same thing. He was sharing an idea and he connected different events through his life. Now, some of those events could have been 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So 15 years, 10 years, 3 years, 5 years, but it's kind of coming closer and closer. So he's taken all these different events, which in their own right could be small stories, but he's connected them with one common theme. So now you've got one bigger story. And then, of course, you've got the revelation in the middle of it. So you've got the message you want to share. Then you've got all these other events, these chain of events that lead to perhaps having an aha moment. So if I carried on the pregnancy story, it's like I caught him, and that was the trigger, boom, not happy. What was I going to do? So then the first thing I tried was, now again, that's specific. Rather than saying I tried this, and this, it's like, okay, you've lost the timeline. A story needs a timeline. So instead of saying I tried this, it's like, well, no, the first thing I tried was this. And I did this for 2 weeks. And then tell the story of that. Because that's a story in its own right. So like the first thing I did was go onto YouTube and I searched for aerobic exercises for post-pregnancy. And there weren't any. So I was like, okay, well, just aerobic exercises. And some, routines came up. And, the first one that came up was like 90 minutes. It's like, I haven't got 90 minutes. I'll maybe be awake in 20. So I went through the list and I found one that was just 15 minutes. Like, okay, I can do 15 minutes. I can fit that in while the baby's asleep. Because it's not a long amount of time. So like I gave that a go. And I did that. And I did that actually daily for about 3 weeks. And yes, I felt better because I was doing some exercise, got the dopamine hit. Yes, I was obviously getting a little bit more aerobically strong because, I probably had more, my heart was certainly getting stronger. My lungs were certainly getting stronger. But looking in the mirror, I wasn't really shifting a lot of weight, and I was still feeling a little bit, soft in places that I wanted to feel a little bit more toned in. So I was like, okay, that's great, but it's not enough. So what else do I do? See, now you can lead to another event. And also so that's a trigger for itself. The fact that you tried something, it didn't give you the result you wanted. So then, of course, that forced you. That's a trigger to go do something else. That's a trigger to go research something else. That's a trigger to try something else. And then, but again, that's another story in its own right. But that adds to this story, which adds to the original trigger story. So now you've got a story that's longer. So you've got a story that ties together, eventually can lead to the aha moment. I found, boom. that if I do this particular type of high impact resistance training combination, this delivers this result. And this was a breakthrough for me. And then I realized I did it, it worked. So then, of course, I shared it with a friend of mine. Now that's another story. And my friend got this result. But at first, my friend struggled with this, so you can talk about some of the problems with it and how you found a solution to that. So now, in telling that story, you're sharing a whole discovery of how you arrived at your solution, how you became good at your solution, and what is that telling your prospects, the people that listen to it? It's telling them you're the expert at that, whatever that is. But you've done it in a story. So there's no resistance. Somebody listening, we're wired for stories. Humans are wired for stories. So somebody listening to that story isn't going, oh, you're trying to sell me something. I'm going to put my credit card in the safe and lock it away so I can't get to it, or I'm going to stick it in a glass of water and freeze it so I can't defrost it. They're not. They're just listening to your story. They're enjoying your story. They're engrossed in your story. But by the end of it, even if you don't promote something at the end of it, and I'm not suggesting you do, they still go away remembering the story, and that plays on their mind, and that belief forms, you're the expert at this. So whatever you want to be known for, tell a story around it. I will say as well, all stories are derivatives of the hero's journey. So if you look at the hero's journey, I've mentioned Joseph Campbell before. The Hero with 1,000 Faces, great book, well worth reading. All Hollywood stories are literally built on the hero's journey. There's always the elements of the hero's journey are in every culture across the country and pretty much have been since human beings have been able to communicate. So all those elements are there. We love them. We're wired for them, which is why we keep going back and watching movies and different movies, which all different stories, different characters, different names, but they all have common themes. They all follow some form of the hero's journey. And so within the hero's journey, you can have subplots. So, like stories where the underdog wins, where the underdog, like David and Goliath, the underdog takes on the giant and wins. The underdog story is a piece of the overall hero's journey. So all of those things can be stories in their own right, and you can use them very powerfully to position you to sell. I'll give you another example from a selling point of view, very specific. You can tell a story about not being able to afford something, but knowing you need to do it. You can tell a story where, you reached a point in your business where you recognized it wasn't working and that actually you needed help. Because, there's in NLP, there's this, what's called the ultimate success formula. And it's this idea that, the first thing to be successful is you got to know what you want. Like, what's the outcome? What's the goal? So you got to be clear what that is. You need clarity on that. And the second thing then is you got to know why you want it. So that, because obviously we're emotional creatures, humans are emotional creatures. What's going to cause you to be persistent? What's going to cause you to take action? What's going to cause you to keep going is the emotions behind it. So you got to know the emotions. Then, of course, the third thing is you've actually got to take action. But like, what should that action be? Like, a lot of people, they think they know what they should do to grow a business, even though it's not obvious. But they go at it and they go, right, well, I got to do this. I'll copy what some other people are doing. I'll get myself a LinkedIn profile and I'll go comment on, 20 different posts every day, and I'll send out 50 connection requests a day. And, that's great. That's doing something. That's building something. But then they might find that it's too slow, or they might find that it's not getting them the kind of clients they want, or they're not making enough to cover their bills, because they weren't aware that actually a better way to do it would be to position yourself as something specific so that you become an authority, and ideally tell stories so you become a celebrity authority, because that would be more powerful. But they didn't know that. And so, maybe they got to a point where they're like, okay, this isn't working. What am I missing? And that's a great question to ask. When something's not working, ask yourself, what's missing? Great question. And it's the first thing I do when I talk to a client. It's like they start talking to me and telling me about the results, telling me about their struggles. In my head, all I'm thinking about is what's missing. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm listening for. So they go, what's missing? And they go, well, maybe there are things I don't know. Maybe there are things I don't even know. Oh my God, what if there's an area of things that I'm just not aware of because I've never studied it. Nobody's ever told me. How do I change that? Well, maybe I find someone that knows how to do this. Maybe I find someone who's grown these type of business that I'm trying to grow. Maybe I see what they did. Maybe I ask for their help. Even better, I'll ask for their help. So I did. I went to them and asked for their help. But, this was their business, was helping people. And it's like, well, they had different options, but, they all started at quite a high amount of money. And I was like, oh, I don't have that. I don't know if I can do that. It's scary amount of money to invest in something up front without knowing whether I was really going to get a result from it. That's scary. It is scary. But what's the alternative? Well, the alternative was I carry on doing what I was doing before and somehow hoping the result's going to change. Well, that's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and hoping you're going to get a different result. So you start to wrap up the story. Does that make sense? So you're wrapping the message in the story. It's like you got to pull the trigger. At some point, you got to pull the trigger. You know, as what's the comedian? I forgot her name. She's an actress, but she's a funny actress. Actor. They're all actors now, aren't they? I should be more correct. Anyway, I forget her name, but she's got this quote where she says, "You can't be that kid stood at the top of the slide. At some point, you got to go down it. You got to go down. You just got to pull the trigger. You just got to go. So you got to do it. You got to have faith in something. You got to do it. You know, so you can use stories like that to overcome the objection of I can't afford it. I don't have the money. You can use a similar story to deal with the objection of I don't have the time. I don't have the time to do it. So you can do all of that. Like, because if you haven't got the time to do it, when are you going to have the time to do it? And if you don't do it, what happens? There's always consequences to every decision you make. And letting fear get in the way never results in a good decision. Never. So, you can tell stories around all of that. So you can use stories very powerfully, use stories to position you, use stories to say, this is how I want to be known. Now I want to tell a story that gets people to believe I can deliver this result, gets people to understand that I'm the expert at this result. Does that make sense? So tell those kind of stories. And then within your, like if you want to nurture people and you're nurturing people through your content, you nurture them in a Facebook group or you nurture them on email, just tell stories. Mix it up a little bit because stories are emotive. So tell stories that share insights, that add value. Sometimes tell stories that just entertain and make people laugh, but tell stories because stories will keep people engaged. Stories will allow you to become a celebrity authority, which means you get to charge higher fees, which means you get to grow your visibility more organically because more people will talk about it. That's the great thing about a story. If you tell a great story, people will tell the story. They'll share the story with their friends because it makes them look good. Like if you've ever been told a great joke, then you want to go and tell other people that joke because it makes you look good when they laugh. That's called social currency. So a great story is social currency. So I'm going to wrap this up for now. I'll maybe do more about it. If you've got any questions about stories more specifically, leave them in the comments below. Also, let me know where you're listening from. So leave that in the comment below as well. And I will potentially do another video just on stories if you ask me some questions that I haven't really clarified for you, because obviously we've got a limited amount of time in any live. But do that. Get into the habit of telling stories. Go learn more about stories. Come back and ask me questions about stories if you want to know more about it. It's an area I've spent a lot of time on. And I will see you in the next live. Give me a thumbs up. Share this. Leave me a comment. Show me some love for the algorithm. I would greatly appreciate that. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're watching inside the Facebook group, then tell other people about the group. And by all means, if you're not in the Facebook group, it is Strategic Rebels Facebook group. Then by all means, come join. All right. I will talk to you again. I've been asked about this before, but if you want to have a chat with me, if you want to book a session just to kind of get some clarity on what you're doing, just follow that link, journal.strategicrebel.com/discovery report. All right. I will see you again in another live. Cheers. Have a great day.